Nigel Farage, head of the UK Independence Party. Do you just want the UK to leave the European Union, or do you want to bring down the whole edifice of the EU?
Well, when I first came here, all the way back in '99, it was perfectly clear that we did not want Britain to be part of political union, and that was our objective, beginning, middle, end. My views changed over the course of the last 9 years, and I think this is because I've been part of a Eurosceptic group here. I've been involved in the French referendum, I've been involved in the Dutch referendum, I've been involved in the Irish referendum, and I now have the view that I don't just think political union is a bad thing for Britain, I think it's a bad thing for the continent of Europe. So our first priority is that Britain regains its independence, but I don't believe this is good for the other countries. So I would like to see a completely different kind of Europe. And it's not a question of wrecking things or destroying things. I want a Europe based on, let's say, the Council of Europe, where sovereign states sit together around a table and come to, sensible agreements. What I don't want is a structure where we have unelected commissioners effectively acting as the government of Europe.
Well, right, let's take this point of democratic first. You say the commissioners are unelected. That's manifestly true.
Yes.
That's manifestly true. But we're sitting here in the Parliament, full of elected representatives. The Parliament are a vital part of the triangle of the three institutions. The Council is a vital part, and that's the member states themselves. Aren't you really overplaying the Commission's hand in all this?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. It's the Commission that has the sole ability to propose legislation and to propose the repeal of legislation. What this Parliament does is it goes through the legislation, it changes the grammar, it shifts things around, it's able to delay things a bit. I mean, the European Parliament is rather like the House of Lords in the UK. It's an amending chamber, but it doesn't actually have the ability to propose legislation. And had the people behind the European project had any vision at all, they would have used the European Constitution to democratise the entire European Union, and they might have just been able to sell that to the peoples of Europe. What they've done is to reinforce the very method that Monnet set up over 50 years ago.
Well, what would you replace it with? Are you seriously suggesting a completely atomistic Europe where everybody just goes their own way, or is there some level of collaboration, cooperation?
Look, I mean, the sort of great myth is that somehow UKIP are isolationists, we want to sort of pull the drawbridge up at Dover. This is nonsense. Our view is a Europe where we trade together, where we behave as good neighbours to each other, and where we sit round the table, as we do in NATO, for example. We sit round the table using a vehicle like the Council of Europe, and we can agree minimum standards, and we can agree environmental cooperation. We can do all of those things, but what we don't want is to have a system whereby the Commission proposes legislation, it becomes European law, and frankly, whether you live in Britain or France or Denmark, who you vote for at the next general election becomes increasingly irrelevant. So it's a completely different kind of Europe that I'm talking about.
Let's assume you do better. What more can you actually do than you do at the moment? Okay, you've got some more MEPs. There's just more of you wearing silly hats or coloured T-shirts or disrupting proceedings. It's just more little boys saying rude words.
Come on. I mean, I think that's rather derogatory. I think if you look at the Independence and Democracy Group, and not just the Brits, but all the different constituent parts, if you look at how active we've been through committees, through plenary, through media, here and back in our national parliaments, I think that if ever there was such a thing as the taxpayer getting value for money out of this place, I think we've provided it. What UKIP have done in a British sense is, by us existing, just as when Jimmy Goldsmith existed before, we have shifted the centre of gravity in British politics on this great European question. When I first started doing this back in '93, '94, people thought that I was either mad or bad, or perhaps a bit of both, and Euroscepticism was a minority sport. If you look at recent opinion polls, you now have 2/3 of Britons want a different relationship with the European Union. It's exactly the model that UKIP's proposing. We want to be friendly, we want to trade, we want to cooperate, we do not want to be governed by these institutions. So I think we've made an enormous difference, and I think if we get an even bigger vote in 2004, what we'll be able to do is to put enormous pressure on the British establishment in Britain, so much so that it could become the issue that decides who wins the next general election. And at that point, we get into a position where we can say to these big parties, give us, if you win the election, give us a referendum. And I think UKIP has the opportunity in June 2009 to force that onto the agenda in British politics.
Nigel Farage, thank you very much indeed.
Żeby była szeroka wolność gospodarcza, osobista w Europie, żeby nie było kontroli granicznych, żeby można było swobodnie lokować firmy na całym obszarze Europy, żeby można było mieszkać gdzie się chce i pracować bez ograniczeń. Natomiast jesteśmy przeciwnikami tego, do czego się dąży, stworzenia takich Stanów Zjednoczonych Europy, czy Związku Sowieckiego Europy, czyli państwa z prezydentem, ministrem spraw zagranicznych i tak dalej.